Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to our fortnightly webinar, Wednesday webinar series. I'm just going to wait a few minutes for everyone to get into the room. I'm thrilled to advise that we have a record number of registrations for today's webinar, no doubt because of the topic and also because of our guests that are on. It is my pleasure to introduce once again Emily Doherty, who is the New South Wales and South Australian State Manager for the Smarter Communities Group. So welcome, Em, and also the Vice President of SCA New South Wales. And no strangers to our Wednesday webinars. We have Matt Press, who is the Director from the Office of Building Commissioner, who is here to walk us through some of the nuances of the Strata Hub, and also Lachlan Malik, who is an Associate Director of Real Estate and Housing Policy from Service New South Wales. So welcome everybody, and welcome everyone who's coming into our room as we go. Okay, today's format is going to be a little bit different to what you're accustomed to with our Wednesday webinars. Reason being, we have a huge number of registrations and also questions prior to today on our subject of the Strata Hub. So what we thought we'd do a little bit different, we've actually prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, which is a combined presentation from SCA New South Wales and also Service New South Wales, to walk everyone through the nuances of the Strata Hub. Now, we hope that these will answer a lot of your questions. No doubt you will have some more questions as we go through. And as always, we do urge you to put your questions into the Q&A chat, also not the chat, but into the Q&A. Emily will be doing her best. Lachlan is from Fair Trading, not Service. Thanks, Matt. Okay, so I've got that first part wrong. So Emily will be doing her best in the background to answer your questions as we can. We'll go through the PowerPoints and then we'll open up to live questions for the second half of the webinar. Now, given the amount of information that we're going to be sharing with you today, we don't profess that we have all the answers, but we will do our best to get back to you. And it's likely that we'll actually conduct a second webinar on Strata Hub once it's closer to the launch date. So let me just share my screen with everyone, which I hope will actually work. I'm sure it will. Here we go. Okay, I trust everyone can see that now. So I'm going to walk you through the first part of the Strata Hub and the things that we do know about it. And then Lachlan and Matt will walk you through the more of the technical side of the Strata Hub. Before I get to that though, however, I do have, what's on the horizon? So what's coming up with SCA in the next couple of weeks? Everyone should know that the Express Golf Day will be held on Friday, the 13th of May, and you should have received the registrations for that not long ago. Secondly, the SCA New South Wales CHU Awards submissions will close on Friday, the 27th of May. However, the awards are open at the moment. I do encourage everyone, all businesses, suppliers, strata managers, individual strata managers to register for the awards. And again, to follow along for all of the SCA events, CPD, education, and so forth, you can follow our social media pages. Lindsay has done a great job there: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Those QR codes on screen, I'll give everyone a few minutes just to link on those if you wish. But again, if you want to follow along with what SCA is doing, I do encourage everyone to look and follow the socials, because that's where you're going to find a lot of information. So let's dive into the Strata Hub. Now, as I said, I do encourage your questions to come through. We have a record number of questions that we're going to try and answer in the second half of today's session. However, let me get underway. Alrighty. Oh, there you go. Click on the QR code and follow us. All right. So Strata Hub, what's it all about? So Strata Hub came about via the Strata Schemes Management Amendment Information Regulation 2021, which was passed late last year, okay? The actual hub itself will commence on the 30th of June, 2022, and information for all schemes, so that's all schemes in your portfolio and registered in New South Wales, must be uploaded to the hub by no later than the 30th of September, 2022. So essentially, we've got 3 months to register all of this information. Now, for schemes that have a first annual general meeting after the 30th of June, they'll have 3 months to load their information onto the hub, with 3 months after their first AGM. And, going back a slide. Yep, that was it. Now, moving along. Next one here will be, for each subsequent calendar year, information must be updated within 3 months of the annual general meeting. Now, the way that we read this, each subsequent calendar year, so once information is initially loaded into the hub by the 30th of September this year, strata managers and owners corporations will be obliged to register information from 2023 onwards. So if you had an AGM, say for argument's sake, in January 2023, you'd be obligated to update the information on the Strata Hub within 3 months of that AGM. As it notes there, the cost will be $3 per lot to register information, and that also includes utility lots as well. And information, if it needs to be corrected or updated, it must be updated within 20 days of the secretary or strata manager becoming aware of the change. So that could be if a strata manager changes, it could be if the secretary changes or one of the committee members or one of the people on the hub changes. My suggestion would be for strata managers, if you are onboarding new buildings into your portfolio, so if you're taking over the management of a scheme, you may want to put this as part of your onboarding checklist, if you like, when you're onboarding a new scheme to update information onto the Strata Hub. So as far as information provided to the hub, now what we've tried to do here is give a little bit of a matrix of what is available and what's not available. So as a guide, there are basically 4 levels of access to information for the Strata Hub. The first one there is information that's available to the public. The next one is information available to people on the strata roll. Now, I'll clarify this by saying, where it says people on the strata roll, what we are talking about executive committee or strata committee members. We're talking about building managers, and we are also talking about others who have access to the building. So basically residents in the strata scheme and those on the strata roll. Next level of access is people for council and the New South Wales Fire Brigade. And the last one there is emergency services, police, SCS and ambulance. So what we've tried to do here with this matrix is just give everyone a bit of a guide as to who is able to access what and what information needs to be on the hub. So you can see there things like strata plan number, date of registration, address of scheme. That'll be static information. Once you upload it once, it's unlikely to change, or in fact, it probably won't change. Next one here, total number of lots and use of lots. Now, we've got this one here in blue. Unlikely that this will change. However, if it does, yes, it will need to be updated as you go through the hub. Okay. Going on to our next slide here. So other information that needs to be available. So if the scheme is part of a community scheme or a precinct scheme, yes, it's available to the public and available to those on the strata roll. Your neighbours rating, date of occupation certificates, and we do have a question about what that means, and we'll answer that in the second half of the webinar. The date of the annual fire safety statement, if it's required. Yes, it will need to be updated annually. No, it's not available to the public, but yes, it is available to those on the strata roll and also council and the fire brigades and rescue. Okay. The class of building that you're in, that will need to go onto the hub as well. And yes, it's available to the public and those on the roll. Okay. Next one here, if there is a strata manager. So strata manager information and building manager information, this is a key point and one of the many questions that we keep getting asked. This information is not available to the public. Okay. Yes, it is available to those on the strata roll and also to council and the fire brigades, as you can see there. And obviously, if it's changed during the year, yes, you will need to update it within 28 days, and you'll also need to update it after the AGM if it changes at the AGM as well. Okay, moving along to the next one. Now, the next one here, insurance information. That will need to be updated. It will not be available to the public, and it's not available. In fact, it's not available to anyone, but it is a requirement of the hub. And we do have a question for Lachlan and also for Matt, is that why does that information need to be provided? And they'll answer that as we go through. The most important one here, and this is probably the one that's got the most inquiry for SCA, is what about information for the secretary, chairperson, and the emergency contact? So you can see here that this information is not available to the public. It will be available to those, however, on the strata roll and those other entities that I spoke about earlier. And it will also be available to council and New South Wales Fire. And you can see there that the emergency contact person, they will also be available to the police, SES, and ambulance. Okay, so that's how that will work. Moving right along, the date of the most recent AGM, yes, it's got to be updated annually. Yes, it will be available to the public, and yes, it will be available to those on the strata roll. Okay, and the last one here will be if the owners corporation is required to establish a capital works fund pursuant to Section 75. Yes, it will have to be updated annually, but no, it is what will not. That information will not be available. The last one here is whether or not a strata renewal committee has been established for the building, and again, you can see the matrix there as we go. So So moving right along. So New South Wales Strata Hub, what we know as we sit here on the 6th of April, 2022. First of all, there will be a trial site that will commence early in May 2022. Now, for strata managers that upload information onto the trial site, that will form part of your 30 September deadline. Okay, so any effort that you put in on the trial site, yes, that information will remain. Next one here. The New South Wales government and the software providers are working on APIs for bulk upload of information. So that will accommodate strata managers being able to bulk upload information from their portfolios. I'm pleased to report Lachlan has been introduced to a lot of the software providers, and they are working on that in the background as we speak. And that's another question that we keep getting asked by members, is that will that bulk upload be available? So the answer right now is they are working on it, not available yet, but it will be coming in the near future. Okay, next one here, what payment options are being explored? So yes, the government is also looking at payment options that will facilitate both for strata managers and for the public. So things like BPay, credit card, and so forth. So yes, those payment options are also being explored. And the next one here, initially, to load information onto the hub, participants will require an individual Service New South Wales account. Okay, so if you're a strata manager, you will go through and verify yourself via your individual Service New South Wales account, and you'll be verified as a manager by your license number. If you're the secretary of the Owners Corporation, you'll also be verified by your Service New South Wales account. Now, I can tell you that, yes, this is another inquiry that we keep getting. The government is working on a Service New South Wales business account to allow strata managers to have one account for all of their strata schemes within their portfolio. Okay, so yes, that is being worked on. Not available just yet, but we believe that it will be coming. So what next? Oh yes, yeah, so I've got it there. Service New South Wales accounts are being worked on for strata managers. Okay, so a lot of the common questions that have been coming through to SCA is who is responsible for loading information onto the hub? How will information be loaded onto the hub? What is the strata manager's role in loading information onto the hub? Can strata managers charge for additional work? And what if there is a breach of privacy? What occurs? We're going to attempt to cover a lot of these questions and others as we go through today. And I'm pretty sure that is all from SCA. So now I'm going to hand over to Matt Press. He's going to walk us through a lot of the elements, the let's say practical elements of the hub. So Matt, thank you for coming on board.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you everyone for inviting me along again. If Penny, whoever's in the background, can flick forward. So thought I'd open by describing why we're doing this, because you see all those matrix, and I can hear, I guess, the groans in the crowd, if you like, because this sounds like a lot of extra work, and to be honest, it is extra work. We're through this initiative, we're requiring schemes to report quite a lot of information that is held, but information that doesn't have to be reported on a portal today. And so I thought it was helpful if you could understand what's going in our head as government, as regulators, about why the hell we wanted to invest in this. And where we were coming from is to try and make strata work better for strata communities. There's 83,000 plus across New South Wales. And through this digital platform, we think we can achieve 4 key things. So the first one is about transparency of information. Information is held by schemes in manila folders or strata managers in their offices in various digital systems. We don't have a single place of reference. And so it's very hard for us as government to actually know all of the ins and outs of schemes. We basically have to do it by asking the industry or asking people like Stephen and Emily for what's going on. So through this portal, we can actually get that information for ourselves, so we know how many schemes are out there, what's the size of those schemes, how old are they self-managed or not, all of that sort of relevant basic information. We can also open up opportunities to ensure that information is handed over between all of the different people that are involved in the life cycle of a building. So you've heard me talking about the new design and building practitioners legislation, and that requires declared designs to go in during construction. The Strata Hub becomes the place where all of that key building information is held in perpetuity. So if other service providers, be they architects or engineers or HVAC consultants, they can access the original as-built designs easily and effectively. The second benefit that we wanted to pursue is accountability. So we want to help have schemes themselves and strata managers have better visibility of all of the different legislative requirements that apply to strata schemes. And we can do that through this portal because we can require information to be provided, which helps the schemes meet their compliance requirements. That allows us to be a better regulator. We can get in front of problems and help strata managers and owners get in front of problems before they escalate and become significant. So some examples of that: insurance. We could now use this portal to identify whether a building might be significantly underinsured, comparing the number of floors, the nature of the building to that value from the portal, and then have firstly a very educative discussion with that building about what's going on here, because it's no good for everyone if they only realise that they're underinsured when they're the next victim of flooding or they need to make a serious claim. It would help us get in front of the bus on annual fire safety assessments, making sure that schemes are actually doing those in a regular and ongoing way, and just as importantly, that they're responding to the issues that the annual fire safety checks arise. You might remember from the research we did with SCA that over 90% of schemes did have their annual fire safety statement in place. We want to make sure that that's 100%, because no scheme should be risking it, that sprinkler system is not going to work in an emergency. Also for capital works, by knowing how much money is being set aside and then spent on capital works, again, we can make sure that the owners are looking after their scheme adequately, because none of us want to be in a position where we've got to pursue a special levy. We want constant and regular maintenance, the top up sort of process, rather than these large chunks. Then the last point I think is engagement. Now, it's been a real struggle, if you think about the crises, COVID and also cladding, to communicate with strata schemes directly. Not all of them have a post box, and with some of those initiatives, I recall people actually having to go out to strata schemes and put a bit of paper in everyone's letterbox and then put some more ones under the door. We can take communication into the 21st century finally, and be able to deliver to you as strata managers and the wider strata community important messages from ourselves as the regulator, from co-regulators like council, and also emergency services. So it is going to be a burden. It is going to be tough going initially. We're trying to think about ways to make that as easy as possible. So having your data from the previous research preloaded, making the user experience with the portal as simple as easy as possible. But if you can just get through this first difficulty with us, hopefully you can see that it's going to unlock a whole new world of possibilities that are going to make ourselves life easier for us as regulators, you as strata managers, and most importantly, for our customers, which is the people that live in and own strata. So, Stephen, I'm going to hand over to Lachlan, who is all across the nuts and bolts of the portal, to step by step some screenshots and go through the questions with you.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Matt. That provides a lot of clarity about what the intention of the hub is. Alrighty, so Lachlan, over to you.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all again, and thanks for having me. Next, we are talking about, because my role has been with really the policy side of things and developing the legislation, I suppose I can talk to you about the types of information that need to be reported, although we could probably go through this reasonably quickly, because Stephen, in your opening gambit there, you did actually provide a good overview of the particular data points that we're asking for in this initial iteration of the mandatory reporting scheme. And I say initial because the idea is that we get the we start with a relatively basic could we just go back to that previous slide? Start with a relatively basic set of information, and there are opportunities, as has been mentioned, for example, by Minister Dominello in the past, to scale up in the future and actually look at further phases of the Strata Hub in future years. We don't actually have any development work going on for that at the moment, so this is really where the focus is. 3 types of information that everyone, as Stephen said, will need to start inputting from 30th of June onwards when the new laws commence. Information about the strata plan itself, information about the management of the scheme, and building and safety information. So we are trying to make it easy to comply with this, although I acknowledge the burden side of things that everyone's concerned about, that we are pre-populating from Land Registry Services records as far as possible, so that certain things will already be there. For example, the plan number, the address, and so on. Some of them will only be a once only, and we'll also be pre-populating from trial phases, for example, as well, so that information put in when the user acceptance, the pilot program starts up in May, will stay there for when the mandatory phase begins after 30 June. And of course, as Minister Dominello was also keen to point out since the early days of engaging with the sector on this, a cost recovery model has been adopted, where there's an administration fee of $3 per lot to support the ongoing administration of the hub itself and fair trading activities associated with it. So we could move along. I think Stephen's already gone through a lot of the aspects of the various levels of information access. We did spend quite some time analysing this and took a very, very careful approach. We are trying to go with minimising risks. We're trying to maximise benefits, minimise risks. Now, I acknowledge that quite a few members of the Strata community have privacy concerns, that their personal phone number and name and so on, and email address are going to be made publicly available. That's not the case. The regulation very clearly governs the information that fair trading may make either publicly available or available in a restricted sense. Some of the reasoning I suppose I could answer during this presentation. There was a question about why are certain pieces of information not being disclosed to anybody in the public, strata roll members or emergency services and regulators kind of groups. And those 4 pieces of information are the scheme or the building's neighbours rating, if they have one, the date of the occupation certificate and whether it was an interim or final that was issued, and then 2 dollar values, the insured replacement value of the building and also the balance of the capital works fund. So they're not going to be made available to any of those other groups. That's regulator only information. Certainly the financial stuff, we don't want to be publicising that, and even to members of the strata roll carries a risk, because tenants have a right to be listed on the strata roll but don't have a right to know about the financial details of the scheme. So they really at this stage are about ensuring regulator oversight of some of those key indicators. And there is a piece of work going on inside the Department of Planning that administers the really fantastic neighbours rating scheme, where they're doing an analysis of whether it should be mandatory for buildings that have a neighbours rating to make it public. And then beyond that, should everyone be required to be neighbours rated is a further question. So if there's anything going to be exposed publicly on that, then it's actually properly the responsibility of the Department of Planning that administers the neighbours scheme. I think that was the... And so here you go, we've got a little bit of what I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in, what it's actually going to look like. This is being built in iterations as we speak. Every week I get a kind of workshop that sees another version as they tinker away and get it right for the, well, basically by the end of this month. All this development is going on till the end of this month. So it's going to be, there's a web address, stratahub.nsw.gov.au, which you can go to now, and you'll see that bottom left-hand graphic there of the Strata Hub login and register page. And as was mentioned earlier, it's registration via an individual Service New South Wales account at this stage. Service New South Wales doesn't have a business account for Strata managers, although we were just found out today that they are in the process of developing one. So there is a business solution coming. It's just that it's not going to be ready for this very first phase of the reporting. And then you need to establish obviously the credentials of the person acting inside the Strata Hub, whether you're a manager, that'll take all of the audience here through a particular pathway, or for those self-managed schemes or those schemes who are doing the reporting themselves, it'll be the secretary who logs on and they go taken through a different pathway. Of course, here we've got what the manager view will look like, and you then go ahead and capture the schemes that you are going to be responsible for. And to answer, I think, what's a fairly common question and an understandable one is that you'll be able to manage the reporting for as many different schemes as you are responsible for through the one account. If you're a manager for a dozen schemes, then you'll be able to report on behalf of all of those dozen schemes through the one email address and the one Strata Hub New South Wales login. So we are trying to make it as easy as possible. Certain things will only open up if you answer a question a certain way. So there'll be a question in there, are you a Class 2 building? If the answer is yes, then it'll open up a further question. Well, tell us the number of stories above ground that you are. But if you say, no, we're not a Class 2 building, for example, we're a row of townhouses, then it won't bother you with that question about how many stories have you got above ground. Sorry, could we just have a look at the previous slide Yep, I think we've been through that already, the Service New South Wales account, sorry. And of course, there's a very important, we are taking privacy very seriously here. We have consulted with the New South Wales Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner throughout the whole process, including the government's original decision to pursue this scheme back in 2020, or the formal decision. Dominello had been talking to industry representatives before that. So there is a privacy notice there about how the information, what information is being collected and how that will be protected and how that will be used once it's collected.
Cool.
And so I guess that just gives you a bit of a better idea of the sort of screens that you'll move through. I guess simple sets of information may take 30 minutes or less to set up. Some others may take a little bit more.
Sure. Lachlan, just while we're here, just on this screen, and a couple of questions that are coming through on the Q&A. A lot of our members have expressed concern about the date of occupancy certificate for the scheme. Given that a lot of strata schemes are older schemes, they may not have this information readily available. Do you know what the protocol will be for that particular answer?
Yes, absolutely. And we are alive to this issue. Thanks for raising it, Stephen. Yep. So we do expect owners corporations or their managing agent on their behalf to make reasonable efforts to locate that information, but we do not expect there to be, move hell and high water in order to figure this out, especially if it's historical or getting old. So there will actually be a disclaimer available on that data field, which enables you to declare that it's lost, destroyed, or otherwise undiscoverable due to age.
Sure. And just while we're on the screen, and guys, I'm just cognizant of the fact Matt has to bail out at 4:30. So Matt, thank you so much for coming in and giving us your insight into the purpose of the hub. Any closing thoughts before you want to?
Well, I'm just going to say that question about OC is a really good one to unpack another benefit. We want to ask that to find out building age, basically, and particularly if you think about statutory warranties. And so to have a view for what of the portfolios in the 0 to 2 years, what's between 4 to 6, And so which building should be particularly sort of concerned about, where we might want to intervene to help them resolve a major or minor defect. You know, so we can be on the front foot, put our overlay of risky developers on there, and even do some more proactive inspections after occupation.
Sure. Another question I might just throw at you guys, if you don't mind, while we're here. So we're on the screen that dictates what the use of lots are. So residential, retirement, other lots, commercial lots, and utilities. A really great question that was forwarded prior to the webinar was, if a lot is being used for, say, short-term letting or an Airbnb, are Strata managers expected to drill down on that level of information?
No, because the nature of the lot will be unchanged, whether the owner of that unit's like putting a long-term tenant in there or living in it themselves or letting it out on a short-term basis. It's still a residential lot.
Fantastic.
In all three uses. So no, we're not capturing short-term rental. Although there are people who would like this hub to declare to the world what the status of short-term rental is in certain strata schemes, but it's not going to do it.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where the nature of that concern was. Okay, on to the next screen.
Thanks, Stephen.
See you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt, even though he's gone.
Yeah, again, I don't know if there's too much, if you just want to let the audience members take a moment to sort of take that in. We're going to be very warmly welcoming the participation of SCA members in the early May sort of trial phase, and hearing your feedback when you'll be able to get a much better sense of how this is going to work, which gives us a little bit less than 2 months until it has to be finalised for the proper go live.
Oh, okay. I might bypass that one. As I mentioned to everyone earlier, I'm just going to stop sharing right now because I think that was the last slide that we had on the hub. Basically, you can see here that this is an evolving piece of information, an evolving piece that Service New South Wales, Fair Trading, OBC are all working on. And as Lachlan just advised, the great time for us to provide feedback will be during that trial period. Emily has been very diligently in the background answering a lot of the questions that are in the chat. And I noticed that we have a ton of questions, which we were all expecting. If there are any questions that we can't get to today, what we will do is we're collating all these in the background. And as I said, it is more than likely that we'll be doing another Strata Hub session, particularly once the trial starts and once you have more questions. But Emily, I might throw over to you because you've got a whole ton of questions here that you'd like to answer.
I do. Well, I'm actually going to get Lachlan to answer most of them. Some of them are quite similar to each other. So I'll throw a couple at you that are the same as each other. So one of them is, do community associations or neighbourhood associations, are they required to submit to the Strata Hub? And likewise, there's another one around BMCs. So is this strictly for owners, corporations and strata plans, or is this sort of, you're looking for everything that we possibly manage?
It is just for owners, corporations and strata plans at the moment. There is a plan to extend the scheme to capture neighbourhood, precinct and community schemes or associations in future. We haven't actually begun work on that. We want to get strata up first because that's the big piece that everyone's interested in. There is a small element of community lands already in this, which asks each strata scheme to declare if it is part of, are you a subsidiary of a scheme in community lands, so i.e. a community scheme or a precinct scheme, and then if so, provide us that number so that we've got that particular part of the picture, but not those community lands themselves don't have to report just yet. But the community lands legislation does have a head of power in it, which allows this scheme to be extended to those schemes as well in future.
Perfect. There is another question here. How are self-managed plans being advised of this requirement?
I was on a workshop just this morning, which was all about communications plans. So there is a team paying this the greatest of attention. We are planning a multi-channeled communication strategy, media, social media. Obviously, with self-managed schemes, we don't have the very convenient access point of licensed strata managers as our key to open the door. But believe it or not, a good old-fashioned Australia Post mail out is being considered to get to all of those schemes as well.
Perfect. There is another couple of questions around the secretary. So in the same vein as each other, one is, if we hold the delegation of strata managers for the secretary, do we enter ourselves twice? And in the same sort of sense, when we've got the emergency contact and the secretary, there's concern in some of the questions that those people listed there, because their information becomes available to tenants and everybody who's listed on the strata roll, that they'll become potentially targeted, harassed, whatever the case may be, because of the role that they're in. So first and foremost, the question, if there is no secretary and we hold that delegation, do we put ourselves in? If there is a secretary who doesn't want to be named, what's the position? And how do you feel around their information becoming more public than it would normally be?
Well, the first one, there should be, or will be, an option to say none elected, because we are aware that there are quite a few strata schemes that merrily go through their year without a committee, and their managing agent just runs the whole place for them.
Yep.
Everyone's happy. But yeah, and so no, you wouldn't be putting yourself down twice, because you're not actually elected as the secretary. It'd just be none elected would be the option there. The second one, look, we appreciate that, but the issue about having members of the scheme know who the secretary is and at least a form of contact for them, this is an expectation of strata members of the strata community, that they know who their elected committee members are and are able to contact them if necessary. So that's just something we're going to have to see how it goes, really. Yeah, aware of the issues around that, but that's the position at the moment.
And
there's a strong expectation of openness in strata.
Yeah, and open. Ultimately, you'll see if someone comes in to do a search, they'll see who the secretary is and things like that. So that information is available. It's just not as readily available as it will be on the hub.
Sure.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, I think the advice for strata managers at this stage is that when you are going through your annual general meetings and electing your strata committee members, it is probably wise advice to advise them that, hey guys, there is a new obligation starting on the 30th of June this year, that your contact information, including your phone number and email address, be loaded onto the Strata Hub. So, and again, that might also be a point in time. And again, I'm grateful to David Bannerman, who gave a lot of advice prior to this webinar, particularly surrounding the privacy concerns that are being raised. That may also be an opportune time to get their permission as a strata manager to upload their information onto the hub. Bearing in mind, and this is something which again, another very important piece of advice from David, the obligation to load information onto the hub is an owner's corporation obligation. It is not a strata manager obligation, okay? A lot of questions have come through about our agency agreements. Are we allowed to do this? Do we have the delegated authority? What is our position? And the simple position is this: you'll need to check what delegation you have in your agency agreements to do this work. If you only take on a partial delegation and you don't have this, you're not able to do this, then you won't be able to upload information to the hub. That will be the obligation of your strata committee members. If you do have the delegation, it would be wise to check in with your strata committee members and say, hey, would you like us to do this for us? A lot of the questions prior to the webinar also surrounded, hey, can we charge our time for doing this? How long is it going to take? All that sort of thing. At the moment, I would urge everyone to jump onto the TESS website. Lachlan, would you mind just sharing again what that web address was?
stratahub.nsw.gov.au.
Fantastic. Lucy, would you mind, if you can, would you put that in the chat just so it'll probably freeze now because everyone will jump onto it following this webinar. However, we'll put that up so everyone can start looking at the hub and seeing what the nuances are of it. So questions surrounding how long does it take to upload information it's going to depend on the size of your scheme, the complexity of the scheme, and probably how efficient, the person is actually uploading the information. When we have open APIs that will allow Strata Manage to bulk upload data, I'm sure that will make life a whole lot easier. But there are some things that Strata managers can do now, like all of our messaging through COVID, through the recent crisis and so forth. Preparedness is the key. So start getting your Strata committees prepared that this is coming. Em, I know you're busy in the background there answering more questions. Are there any other themes that
there was another one regarding the APIs, and I think that Stephen and I were on a meeting last week with Lachlan and his team, and there's certainly development going on behind the scenes so that we can support each other in the software providers that we all use, being able to get some information onto the hub so that we don't have to actually sort of manually enter the whole lot. So that work is absolutely being done behind the scenes. I've got 19 questions open at the moment, so let me give you another one.
There's a lot.
There is.
Sorry, Emily, can I just answer before you do that? My apologies for jumping in. In relation to the Strata Hub that's up now that I just mentioned, that web address, it's actually not open for this reporting scheme. It's because there was the first phase of the Strata Hub was for the building bond and inspection scheme, so that developers could actually lodge there and manage their building bond on there. So you won't actually get a sort of too much joy if you try to find out what it's going to be like to register and report as a managing agent for this new scheme.
Okay, so there's a couple of others. There's one here about the LRS. So the slides state that the information will be sourced from the LRS records. Does this mean that when it's changed at the LRS level, that the changes then reflect on the hub?
Yes.
Excellent. And this is a popular one around the Strata role. How is the Strata role access to be controlled? Does this mean that the owner's corporation needs to upload all lot owners' contact details to the hub so that they can all gain access to the hub? And there's a couple of further questions on the Strata role. There was one around, do tenants get access to the hub, which we've answered behind the scenes, of course, is a yes. So with the Strata role itself, how do you cross-check and understand who is on the Strata role, and how is that information then reflected in the hub?
This has been a thornier issue than we first expected. It's been quite the journey. So the proposal at the moment is no, we are not requiring anyone to report their Strata roles through to us. We are trying to come up with a solution, though, that relies on lot owners who are eligible, must be listed on the Strata role, to use LRS information about who owns what in Strata. And then the other one is rental bond information about registered. If you're a tenant who has lodged a bond that's currently live in the system with fair trading, then you are expected to be, eligible to be on the Strata roll for that scheme. They're the two sort of prongs of our approach.
Awesome. Lachlan, just a real quick one. I'm with them trying to catch up on all the questions that are open. There's a lot of them. Real quick one from Robert Anderson. Is there GST on the $3?
Flat fee.
Flat fee. Awesome. Thank you for that. That's a nice and easy one. So,
Lachlan, there's a couple of questions around if we, let's say I personally registered a scheme and put my name down as the Strata manager and logged all of the details in there. Could the secretary of that scheme also have access to those same records? If we're no longer the Strata manager, how do those information sort of get overridden each time that there's a change that might not be managed by that original Strata manager?
As in transferring the responsible party who's reporting on behalf of that scheme. Might need to take that one on notice if that's okay, in terms of answering the technical process that's going to go through.
There is a few queries here of that nature. So we might take some of these and perhaps talk to Ivan and get some feedback out to the members.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's another one very similar, and this was another common question that was raised prior to the webinar. There's a question here, what are the penalties for not keeping information up to date? The initial penalties are $220. And I know the comment's been made, Lachlan, I know you've received this feedback. Well, the fine is less than the cost of actually registering information, so we'll just cop the fine. Have the government thought about any, let's say further fines if there are just rogue owners corporations out there that refuse to upload data? Or
Yeah, so there is, so that's the penalty notice that can be given out as a sort of on-the-spot fine by a fair trading inspector or compliance officer, but there are maximum penalties in the legislation which would require a prosecution, and they're not all that much higher, to be honest with you. Yeah, so it's a couple of $1,000s rather than a couple of $100. Yeah. And so, yes, that's not lost on me that, but the issue that you just raised, you know, it's an administrative scheme, and the government is always, you know, conscious that punishments have to be, or penalties have to be, proportionate to the nature of the offence. So, you know, there's a question of fairness and justice as well here, without becoming too highfalutin about it.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to defer to you if you don't mind. I'm just answering another question on the chat.
Absolutely. Yep. So there's another one here, and this has come up a little bit in our discussions prior to this webinar, and as we've been working with you on this, Lachlan, around the commercial sort of aspect of this. So how, an anonymous attendee has asked us, how would it be prevented for another strata company claiming management of a plan to get access to that information? So how do we prevent sort of those that aren't doing the right thing with the information using it in that incorrect way?
Yeah, there will be controls around this, and so you know, that goes to the transfer issue of you know, releasing a scheme from the control of a particular managing agent and moving it over to another. The governance controls around that, we're going to have to get back to you on it, and we're alive to the risk though.
Yes. Yeah. There is another one here regarding how does fair trading expect to have the resources to verify that the information is correct? So what does that sort of check looks like, or is there going to be a cross check?
Well, I suppose it depends on which piece of information you're talking about.
So Leo has asked, okay, so he's actually given us that. As he said, how does fair trading expect to have the resources to verify and ensure that, for example, the insurance is correct?
We're relying on that as it's self-reporting. You know, if we get in there, I mean, we don't actually really have a compliance role on the amount that a strata scheme chooses to insure itself for, value of its policy. But it's an indicator, so it's a useful indicator.
Yeah, and I think Matt covered this one off a little bit, where he said it's a guide for the government to check, and you know, and the regulator to check to make sure that owners corporations are, you know, so if you're managing a scheme and it's, you know, seemingly outside of the average, that'll be something for the regulator to look at and say, okay, this looks like an outlier.
Yeah, or zero. If some schemes may say not insured. Yeah. You know, no insurance policy at the moment. Yeah. So that's also an important indicator.
Yeah, exactly. And that'd be an interesting one, for example, with a BMC, where the building policy may be held by the building management committee. That's going to be a fairly difficult one for strata managers to answer.
Well, you'll just pop in your ancillary policy, which might be a couple of $1,000s and not reflecting of how big the scheme might be.
So look, as we've said from the outset, this is a new service which the government are working on. So no doubt there are going to be teething issues. And judging by the record number of questions that we've had coming in, there are a lot of obviously things that we haven't considered or the government hasn't considered either. And a lot of these things will be teased out, as Lachlan said, through the trial period. So my advice to all strata managers out there, again, when the trial period is open, and we will no doubt from SCA New South Wales issue correspondence to strata managers letting them know that the trial period is open, and that'll be the time to, you know, when you can really hammer the site and answer a lot of these questions. So yeah. Em, you have any other interesting ones that come up?
There's another one here regarding, I think this would be a popular use of it, although it would probably isn't how it's intended. So anonymous attendee asked us, can we locate the managing agent details for the schemes that we do not manage? So for example, if I've got a dispute or I need to replace a fence, will we be able to see this information?
Initially, no, although that was strongly desired from a lot of people who answered the public feedback a year or 18 months ago, that they really would like to know who's managing the scheme next door, kind of thing. But at this stage, the details of the strata managing agent for a scheme will be known only to members of that scheme itself.
Sure. Another one's just come through here. What if a committee member refuses to permit their information to be put on the portal? So we need to, or we'll likely seek consent to enter their data. What if we do not get that consent?
Well, you know, then they're going to have to think about whether they can continue to serve on the committee, because as Stephen pointed out earlier, it is actually going to be part and parcel of serving on the committee, is that particular piece of information being made available. So we may have to work through that scenario a little bit more, I'd say.
Yeah, Lachlan, just, and I think I am talking on behalf of a lot of our members. That has been a very common theme that's been coming back from strata managers who have started to alert their owners corporations and their strata committees about Strata Hub. The concerns that, you know, if there's a noise dispute on a Saturday night, you know, between two parties and someone jumps onto the Strata Hub to see, oh yes, Lachlan Mallock is the secretary, I'm going to go around and bang on his door to make sure that he resolves this dispute. That's the sort of thing that that members and certainly owners are concerned about, which again, I know that feedback's been given to government. Again, the intent of the hub, as you said, is to be an information resource for people and not to be, I guess, abused, you know, in that way. Regrettably, when these sort of initiatives are taken, there are always those that are going to try and skirt around it and use it for, you know, their own nefarious means. But yeah, there's some of the concerns that have been coming back from members, which I know that we've given over to Service New South Wales and the OFT. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens when the rubber hits the road.
There's another one here regarding penalty notices. So, the answer is the owners corporation, but who are the penalty notices served upon for failure to provide or upload the information? The owners corporation, the office bearers, or the managing agent? So I think Anna's asking, because if we hold delegated authority to actually do this for an owners corporation and fail to do it in time, that the owners corporation will ultimately still be responsible for any fines that come with that. Deadline
not
being missed.
quite. If it's delegated to the managing agent, then what is it, section 57 of the Strata Schemes Management Act says that the Strata managing agent is in breach, so it would actually fall to the managing agent, even though yes, it's an owners corporation reporting responsibility, but just like any other obligation, the penalty could fall to the managing agent. Having said that, fair trading's first and second and potentially even third approach is not going to be or response is going to be going around fining people. That's not the point of this exercise. But you know, unless you put some kind of a sanction in there, people will say you're not taking it seriously.
Of course. Yeah.
Emily, I'm actually going to pose a question to you, if you don't mind, as a strata manager and large strata management company. I guess, what are you guys, have you thought about how you're going to prepare your owners, your committee members for loading information onto the hub?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that we've needed to factor in. Of course, it's going to take some resourcing from our end to do that. There is, as part of our discussions, the ability to have the corporation license listed against the individual who's actually entering the data. So part of the trial in May, we're really interested to see how that plays out. So we obviously need to work out, how long we think it's going to take. And how many people essentially we actually need to support us in doing that. We're really keen, and I know that some of the software providers have been working with Lachlan and Ivan's team to actually get a lot of that bulk information in there for us. So the other part of it for us is understanding what resolutions, what consents, so do we look at holding a committee meeting to actually give us the go-ahead to do this, to get the sign-off from the office bearers to enter their information, to resolve your emergency contact? Who do you want that to be? Because I think some businesses really need to have a think about, is that going to be someone from their business? And if you don't have an internal after-hours service, what does that look like? So there's some of, I guess, the considerations that we've been looking at, and it will come at a cost to the owners corporation. So we will look to bill for our time. Certainly, we're not keen to make a profit out of this, but absolutely, if it requires additional resourcing, then we will be looking to put, that in place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just on that point, SCA is due to release an updated agency agreement later this year to reflect the proposed changes that are coming to the strata reforms that are going to be released later this year. And Pete Brisbane, I know you're online, mate. So his group is working on that. So if you've got any feedback for Pete, let him know. I know one of the things that we will consider in the new agreement is also a tick box on the Strata Hub saying, okay, do you give authority for the strata manager to upload this information? And that will dovetail in with the Schedule B cost and what it may be. Through the trial period, it will give strata managers a far greater understanding of how long it will take to upload this information. I know a lot of strata companies will be doing it in 15-minute increments. Mm-hmm. And again, it would largely depend on the size of the building. So I can imagine a little 6-lot strata scheme, will be a relatively short period of time. If you're doing a monster, it may take a longer period of time. So again, it will be very much time dependent on how long it takes to upload that particular information. A couple of questions that have come in, which I will knock over. One here is, if there is a fine to those committee members refusing to consent to provide their information, will the fine be applicable to them or the owners corporation? Quite simply, the fine will go to the owners corporation. Then I guess those committee members will have to explain their actions to the other members of the owners when they go to their next meeting. So that's how that will effectively work. Who will be the nominated emergency contact? Will it be the managing agent, secretary, or another nominated resident? As Emily has just mentioned, this is the sort of thing that you should be gaining feedback from your strata committee members now. I would think that in a lot of cases, the person who's the secretary would probably also want to be nominated as the emergency contact. And just so everyone understands the intent behind that particular clause, this is really so the authorities, and particularly emergency services like SES, ambulance and so forth, they have a point of contact at the building if something does happen, okay? Recent history tells us we've had things like combustible cladding, we've had things like Mascot Towers, Opal Towers, those sort of disasters. We also went through the recent pandemic where we had strata schemes locked down and that sort of thing. Part of the purpose of the hub is to provide the agencies with contact details for the building. So when things happen, they can happen in an efficient manner and there is a distribution point or a contact point at the building. So that's essentially the score with that. Look, it is 4:57. I'm very cognizant of time, and I'm also quite aware that there are a number of questions that we haven't got to today. My promise to all members out there, we will be doing more sessions on the hub. We promised one. I think we might have to do two by the way things are going. So, and no doubt we'll have more questions and better answers once the trial period starts. Just before I sign off, Emily, any closing thoughts for members out there?
Oh, look, I think for all of us, it's about starting to think about what you're going to need to put into place. Mm-hmm. That's the big key here, that have a think about. And look, the SCA will, of course, provide some guidance and some documents that will be helpful. But in your own businesses, you know your business better than anyone. Have a think about what you need, how you'd like to approach this, what you'd like to recommend to your clients. The details on, entering this or the technology piece, or that'll come as part of the trial, and we'll certainly be able to provide more guidance as we go through. For our members, it's all about your businesses, your buildings, and how you're going to start to, get your heads around this and support your owners' corporations.
Fantastic. And Lachlan, from you.
Well, just thanks very much for bearing with us, and stick with it. I'm sure the benefits will flow. We're in the first phase. We're not even on the start line yet, so stick with us, and we appreciate you are just such an important key for government through to the strata community. So that's why we are always so happy to turn up and help wherever we can when SCA calls.
No worries. Fantastic. Mate, thank you so much for coming along. Emily, thank you again for donating your time to this. I know you were busy in the background answering as many questions as you can. For everyone out there online, please continue to send through your questions because they will help us formulate the content for future webinars on the Strata Hub. Obviously, any questions, comments, concerns you have, we will feed directly back to Lachlan and his team. Be assured they are listening. I know things appear to, move at a glacial pace, but trust me, the wheels are in motion in the background and they are very receptive of what our concerns are. So thank you, Lachlan, once again for coming along. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Matt, even though I know that you're not here. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. We will hopefully see you next time in 2 weeks, perhaps on the Strata Hub, perhaps on something else. We will certainly let you know, but keep an eye out for when the trial period starts. And I know that Lucy and the secretary in the background will let everyone know about that in comms. Don't forget to follow us on all the social media pages. pages and so forth. Don't forget to get your submissions in for the SCA awards, and don't forget to register for the golf day. There you go, Penny. I hope I covered everything off. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for coming along. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.